piece of paper and pencil that I'm writing stuff down. So it looks like we're going live early. We're going live early.
Oh, why?
And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for tonight's edition of College Journey Conversations. We're excited to be here tonight. This is going to be a really fun evening. We've got some great stuff in store for us tonight, and we're going to be trying some new things and sharing a little bit more information that could get a little interesting, but we're excited to be able to pull it off if we can. We're really excited to have our friend Stefanie Miles with us. We're going to go there in just a minute, but I wanted to let you all know a little bit about Capstone Educational Consultants in terms of where we're located. In case you didn't know, we're located here in Peachtree City, Georgia, but we're also located in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're excited that Stefanie Miles is a part of Capstone Educational Consultants and serves us well in Huntsville. And Stefanie and I met many years ago. I say many, it's probably what, 5-6 years ago, on something like that, on a campus tour with SACAC. And if you don't know what SACAC is, it's the Southern Association of College Admissions Counselors, and they serve and provide opportunities for independent consultants like ourselves and high school, school-based counselors to go on college tours. We actually met on one of those tours while touring one of the schools here in the great state of Georgia. And we connected well and just fell in love with Stefanie's heart and her work ethic and all she has to offer students. And our friendship developed in such a way that professionally it was able to kind of pull things together with Capstone, and we're pretty excited about it. Stefanie, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and all that wonderful stuff. Share with our listeners who you are.
Well, I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, a long time ago. We won't mention the years. I went to the University of Memphis, used to be Memphis State, and got a degree in public relations. And my first career job was actually a sales account executive at FedEx. I had worked all through college that way and loved it. But then my second career happened. That was a stay-at-home mom. And I have 3 kids, but they've kind of grown up now. So I had a third career, and that's as an educational consultant. And it's been a thrill. Right now, I have a 2020 COVID graduate from Mississippi State, and he's headed to seminary in the fall. And then I have a rising junior in Mississippi State. And then I have another COVID 2020 graduate from high school who's headed to Alabama in the fall. So we've had lots of fun doing homework from home. The boys came home for spring break and they never went back. Wow. So they were, I think my oldest was thinking that his end of college would not end in his bedroom upstairs at our house. So, but I got into educational consultants because I had worked at the children's school and I just saw the need for it. And so I actually went back to school and learned how to be an educational consultant. I adore students, and I really felt the calling to help them in their next part of their journey in life. High school's great and it's fun, but it's a stepping stone. And getting into the right college as far as the best fit is so important so they can thrive and they can grow and discover who they are as they're going to be as an adult. So it's been a genuine thrill, and I've loved working with you, Mark. It's been fun. It's been a hoot. So I've been very blessed. So thanks for taking me along this ride with you because I've loved it.
Well, thank you. You have been a huge contribution to Capstone Educational Consultants across the country, in fact, because not only are you working with students in Alabama, But you're also stretching outside the borders of Alabama, which is exciting, and serving students in Tennessee out of the Memphis area, which is pretty exciting, and stretching into Texas, I believe, and serving some students there. So pretty excited about the breadth of service that you're offering and the quality of service that you're providing families, not just in the state of Alabama or in the city of Huntsville, which is a fantastic place to be. I will agree, right?
It is.
Well, good stuff. Well, we're excited to come together tonight. Our subject tonight is talking about preparing for the college admissions process. That is the kind of the underlying theme of this evening. And as we've been preparing for that, Stefanie, you know, a lot has kind of happened. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot going on in our world today and a lot going on in our country as it relates to higher education. We talked last week on last week's Facebook Live event, College Conversations, about the fact that there are so many changes occurring in higher education. And with those changes come changes in the admissions process. And so I know for a fact there are some families and students that are worried about what's happening or what to expect and what to anticipate. Do you get a sense of that, Stefanie, from the students and families that you're talking with and working with in terms of what they're thinking and concerned about?
Most of the students I'm working with are kind of just continuing on the path, and I've encouraged them to do that. And the schools, at least in the Southeast, where a lot of my students are going, are already coming out with when they're going to start school again in the fall, and it seems to be very positive. Now, things can change, and we obviously know that, and we have to kind of be prepared for that, but not worry about it, because it would be a real shame for students to be concerned and stressed all summer long. This is their last summer before college starts, and you know, my daughter's not going to even graduate until June, the end of June. It's supposed to be actually on Monday. And of course it's been put off. And, you know, you just need to make lemonade out of lemons. And that's kind of what we've had. And everything's been different. And I just encourage the parents that they have a question to call either their high school counselor, call someone like me, and to get the real truth, because we can kind of dig in and find out what's really going on. If there's a particular school that you're interested in, there's so much crazy information coming out from so many different places. And before you worry about it, ask somebody that can help you. And that way we can get the right information so nobody's stressed.
Now, we have a number of people listening to us and watching us right now, and we're pretty excited about all of our listeners and viewers, and thank you for joining us tonight. And if you have a question or a comment that you would like to ask Stefanie or myself, feel free to put it in the comment section. Eric, thank you so much for your comment. Eric, one of our listeners and viewers, has a question for you, Stefanie, which is pretty exciting. Yeah. So he asks, does your college-bound son accept your expertise? You know, that's kind of a tricky question because, you know, mom kind of helping son along the college path, it can be quite challenging.
It can be, but I think by my -3, she's seen that I might know something. And so she's really been good about following along and doing that. My oldest kind of was harder, I think, because he didn't know if I really knew what I was talking about. And, but yes, my youngest one has kind of figured out she didn't need to reinvent the wheel. Mom probably knows. And so she asks, and that is a blessing. So yeah, no, there's not a lot of friction.
Yeah, it can definitely be a challenge. As you know, right, I have 4 of my own and 2 of them are in college as we speak. And so they have they were definitely asking Dad his thoughts on their journey, and along the way, although I would have to say that I chose not to have my fingers too deep in that process to allow some freedom in that. They had some great people they were working with, and that was a good thing. But they did always come to Dad to kind of check some things out along the way, and I was glad to be a part of that. You know, preparing for the college admissions process in the midst of this type of well, as we are in a pandemic, can be definitely challenging, right? Here we are right now in the midst of high schools closing and going online, standardized tests, cancellations, both SAT and ACT have both canceled. Summer camps have canceled. Most summer programs have canceled. And now we're starting to kind of look a little further down the road with college starting for the now class of 2020 getting into college. And we've got some college and universities that are opening. I'm thinking more regionally for us, right? The University of Tennessee has said they are going to be open. The Georgia system right now, for now, has decided they're going to be open for the most part, although summer programming has canceled. Yet we have been most recently notified nationally that California system is going to be all online. So we've got some differing situations, and of course that could cause a variation of the theme as students move forward for admission. Now, for the most part, the seniors are set in place, right? But what about these juniors that are like preparing and moving in? There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of questions that are up. Now, as I see it, and maybe you see it a little differently, Stephanie, but as I see it, you know, I feel like everything kind of falls into one of two camps. And those camps being things you can control and things you can't control, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you, as a student, as parents, you really need to concentrate on the things you can control. And like you said, there are schools that are not, you know, in California, they're not even going to open until the spring. And there's nothing you can do about that. And as you said, the seniors are kind of set and the cards have been dealt, so to speak, and they're just going to have to live with whatever the schools decide. But as far as the juniors are concerned, I think stressing over things you can't control just makes your senior year not what it should be. And you're going to have to study. And those, you know, the things you can control, you know, you can control your grades. I mean, those, and particularly I know with having a senior, it was real hard to do the studies. I mean, you know, she's sitting in our dining room with her computer up and she's doing Zoom classes, and some teachers were really good at it and some really weren't. And you get this big email at the beginning of the week of everything you needed to do. So it was really hard to do. So I'm hoping that the schools have been gracious in the grading so that the last quarter of their junior year doesn't hurt anything. And I imagine most schools would do that. Right. But I would suggest that you just look towards the things you can control. So you can control your grades. You can also spend this summer working on your ACT, SAT prep. Now, it's not something you can take the test, but you can certainly practice. And there's plenty of, I mean, Capstone has a great ACT, SAT prep. Mm-hmm. And it's all online and you can do it at your own pace and take advantage of this summer while you may not be able to go to the camps you want to go to. And no, it's not fun necessarily to study for ACT, SAT. I always got a lot of blowback on that. But what you do need to consider is ACT, SAT has a lot to do. It's tied to your merit aid. So when you go for scholarship monies, it's hugely tied to that. You can have a decent GPA, and if you tank your ACT, SAT, you know, whether I agree or disagree with that, it's the way it is. So use this time wisely. I mean, wouldn't you say, whatever suggestions do you have for this summer?
Well, you mentioned grades are something we can control. And I would agree with that, but there's also an aspect of that we cannot control at this point. And that's because there are systems that are going pass fail, which are no grades, and students are, as I see it, pretty stressed out and concerned about what their GPA is going to look like, right? Because we're talking about preparing for college admissions. And in doing so, high school students look toward their GPA as being a very significant factor in gaining admission into a college. So if it's just a pass fail, or if it's because they weren't able to do their absolute best in a class and they don't get their most optimal grade, then they're going to be super concerned about it. So my comment on that and my thoughts on that particular aspect of not being able to control that aspect of your grades is this. There's a huge asterisk on everyone's transcript for the spring of 2020. And there's nothing that anyone can say different about that. It is a fact that across the board, no matter what school you're in, every college and university is going to be looking at the spring semester of 2020 with a big asterisk. And that is that there's something that took place that was beyond their control. And so they know that if there's an anomaly in that grading system, or there's an anomaly in their performance, that there's going to be an immense measure of grace likely given to students from the spring of 2020. Look, I mean, here we are, right? Everybody is going through the same exact experience. We're all, we've seen the slogan, hashtag, we're all in this together, right? Everybody's experiencing much of the same thing. And high school students, as it relates to preparing and moving forward, we're all in the same boat, right? There's very few, if any, of us, and when I say us, I mean high school students, who are not affected by the shutdown. And it's going to have an impact on grades, no matter how you look at it. And so that's definitely something that we cannot control. Colleges and university admissions offices, and I can tell you that for a fact because I'm former college admissions myself, right? So I went through a particular asterisk kind of experience at the institution I served at, when there was a devastating fire that shut the campus down for an entire semester and had us change everything that we did, and everything that we were comfortable doing, we had to do different than we did it yesterday because it was such a sudden transition. So I get this. And, change is a big thing. And when it's forced upon us, we're less likely to move forward, thinking clearly about it. But we have to understand that if we're all in the same boat, then those that are on the receiving end of these grades are going to, and test scores are going to understand that something has impacted this and made a big difference in it. Now we're also looking at, testing. We've had several SAT tests canceled, and ACT test administrations canceled. We've all got our fingers crossed for June for the ACT. We've all got our fingers crossed for July for the ACT test. SAT is not coming online until August, and then each month throughout the entire fall. The good news in this is that there are going to be test administrations. That's the good news. But we can't control whether or not they're canceled, right? And so for us to get worked up over and stressed out on the fact that a test administration has been canceled is not productive. However, we can control what we do about it. And so we can control when we schedule our next test, and we can control how well we do on that test by preparation. I kind of take a stance that we need to focus in on things that we definitely have control over.
Absolutely.
So let me, we've got another question here that says here, let me read it for us. Let's see, if a student does extremely well academically during the COVID spring, so that would be the spring of 2020, right? Should he or she emphasize that performance as a selling point in the admissions process? More broadly, he says, how can he or she sell the asterisk? Right? Well, here's the thing. What's your thoughts on that, Stephanie? And then I'll address that.
Well, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So my thoughts on that specifically is that admissions, when we're going through the admissions process, when a student is preparing for admissions, one of the key factors in the process is standing out amongst all of the applicants. There's typically thousands of applications that cross the desk of the admissions office for evaluation. And if all of them have relatively the same GPA or relatively the same scores, then, what is it that's setting them apart? And of course, telling the story about your experience during COVID spring, if we will, is not a bad idea, but it's almost equivalent of hearing all of the essays about mission trips, which, not to knock the mission trip, we love those mission trips, and there's lots of learning that takes place and lots of growth. But there's by far more in your life than took place on that week-long mission trip. And so like that, here in this COVID experience, when everybody is literally sitting in the same boat, you got to drill down a little bit deeper than just the surface level of we all have been there. And identifying those things that took place that taught you something, that allowed you to grow, allowed you to stretch yourself beyond where you used to be. How are you different on the backside of the spring COVID experience than you were going in? What kind of things did you take advantage of or before that now you have a different appreciation for because of the experience? What kind of things did you learn in the process? And those are the emphasis. That's how you kind of begin to develop that asterisk, if you will. Now, interestingly enough, it will likely not take the primary essay space, but it will likely take a supplemental essay space at most universities. I know the Common App is actually including a question that can address that for students who just need to talk about that experience. So that would be my answer to that in terms of even though they're doing very well academically during that COVID experience, finding that area that they've been able to really grow in is best.
Well, I know with my daughter, she was, it's always, I hate going to school. I don't want to go to school. It's all that. It's her senior year. She just wants to graduate. And she actually went on a trip with her father the week before spring break. So she didn't really say bye to anybody because, she went, then she came back and it was spring break. So here's another week. Well, during that week is when the world fell apart. And so it's like she didn't even get to say goodbye to her friends. And so I think through this process, she has learned to appreciate those things that were common everyday things, and she's changed her outlook. So maybe using the spring COVID and how did it change you? I mean, maybe you thought certain things were important that now that you've sat back, you've had some time to rest. Because I know with my family, everybody's pretty rested, and I'm sure everybody else did. When you're not stressed, you're resting.
Right.
And how has that changed you? Do you look at school differently? I had told her when I was in high school, you always talk about, I want my school to burn down. And just like you brought up, well, there was a fire at our school in high school. And all of a sudden, we were like, oh my gosh, we're so sad. So when something major happens, especially like this, how did it change you?
Right.
How was your outlook and your perspective changed? So that may be something you can share that's special internal to you instead of, well, I was sitting at home and I was studying, but how did that change your heart? And that's what admissions wants to know. Who are you, and how did this change you? Right. So that might be something that you could consider when you're writing.
Academically speaking, one thing that comes to mind that students could possibly do during the summer, given the fact that summer programs are closed and they're not going to be able to participate in the activities that they had hoped to participate in, which would further provide, depth to their admissions application. One thing they could consider is actually doing an academic class online at a university throughout the summer that is challenging, and that they could receive a good grade, a grade from, an actual hard grade that then could demonstrate their proficiency and demonstrate their ability to really be engaged regardless of the circumstances. So I would encourage students who are looking for something to do this summer to consider taking their academics a step further, just kind of step away from where they have been. Maybe they got a pass fail for spring COVID, right? Maybe they got a pass fail, or maybe they're trying to, maybe they had the opportunity to use their spring COVID grade or their fall grade, right, as their final grade, and it doesn't reflect them accurately as to who they are academically. And so maybe by stepping out and doing an online class would bring them much favor in that. Thoughts on that?
I do think some of these four-year universities that otherwise would not be online as much for the summer, they're all online.
Right.
Maybe some subjects that you wouldn't been able to take online that are going to be available. So I would certainly, that's a great idea to look into that.
Right. And I've also thought, about things like there are some courses that have kind of taken a hit that are in the curriculum as a result of not being face-to-face. And I think of the foreign languages, they really build on each semester on learning so that they can move into the next year prepared for, Spanish 2 or Spanish 3. And so I would encourage maybe getting some type of get a refresher course or some type of assistance in the process with learning maybe what you kind of missed out on, so that you bring yourself up to par for this next year with some of those classes. It may be a math class, it may be geometry or algebra or something like that, where you had the class, you passed the class, you got through the class, but you didn't really learn much of the content because it was kind of all weirded up on us, and so you just didn't get that optimal experience. And so going back and doing some refresher courses might be a good idea.
Well, they're building blocks. And if
Right.
you miss some building blocks, when you go into the fall, you don't want to be struggling and then your grade suffers again because you miss those building blocks through no fault of your own. But nonetheless,
Right.
That's a great idea to do that.
Well, good stuff. I think these two categories and these two camps of working through things you can control and not worrying about those things that you can't control are really big. Further, I think, how we adapt to change is even more challenging than that, right? I think of the many times I've had to go through change, and it's painful. Change is painful. And oftentimes we throw some serious resistance at it. I was reminded in preparation for this a little bit of I mentioned the fire that I had gone through as an administrator, and our president at the time shared with us an old book called "Who Moved My Cheese," and it talks about change and how we adapt it. And so that's our exciting time tonight. And I'm going to actually, for our viewers, I'm actually going to play a video version of this book, and I'm going to kind of give you some heads up on it. It's not the best quality. It's an old video, so it's not the best quality, but the sound is great on it, and it's about 11 minutes long. So if you can hang with us, that's awesome. Stick with us and just enjoy it. But the application, we're going to come back afterwards and talk a little bit about the application. But it has, I think, some really interesting applications for where we are right now as a whole. Like, we're all in the same boat, and I think this has application for all of us. And it's pretty exciting. It's a little cheesy, no pun intended. No pun intended. It's a little cheesy, but I think that it'll be exciting. So hang with us. I'm going to make a transition over to that video here in just a second. So bear with me as we make this transition. Give me just a moment.
Once long ago, in a land far away, there lived 4 little characters who ran through a maze looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy.
2 were mice named Snip and Scurry.
And 2 were little people named Ham and Haw.
As different as the mice and little people were, they shared one thing in common.
Every morning, they left their homes and raced out into the maze to find their favorite cheese.
Snip and Scurry had simple brains but good instincts. They used a simple method of trial and error.
Snip would smell out the general direction of the cheese,
and Scurry would race ahead.
They often went off in the wrong direction and bumped into walls.
But Ham and Haw had complex brains with beliefs and emotions that made their life in the maze more complicated and challenging.
Finding cheese was important to the little people.
It was a way of getting what they thought they needed to be happy. For some, it was having material things. For others, it was health or peace of mind.
For Haw, cheese meant living in a cozy cottage with a loving family on Cheddar Lane.
To him, cheese meant being a big cheese in a mansion atop Camembert Hill.
Eventually, they all discovered their own kind of cheese in Cheese Station C.
Every morning after that, Snip and Scurry woke early each day and ran the same route through the maze to Cheese Station C. Snip and Scurry hung their running shoes around their necks in case they needed to get to them quickly.
But Ham and Haw awoke each day a little later and sauntered over to Cheese Station C.
After all, they knew where the cheese was and how to get there, and they assumed it would always be there.
Ham and Haw put their running shoes away. They thought they wouldn't be needing them again.
This is great! There's enough cheese here to last us forever. Sure is.
They felt secure. They even decorated the walls with sayings.
Ham and Haw became so comfortable they didn't notice what had been happening.
Meanwhile, Snip and Scurry inspected the area each morning to see if there had been any changes from the day before.
One morning, they arrived at Cheese Station C and discovered there was no cheese.
They weren't surprised, since they'd noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller.
The mice did not overanalyze things. The situation had changed, so Snip and Scurry changed.
They were soon off in search of new cheese.
Later that day, Ham and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C.
They had not been paying attention to the changes that had been taking place.
What? No cheese? No cheese? Who moved my cheese? It's not fair.
Ham, I know we're smarter than mice, but we're not acting like it at the moment. What'll happen if the cheese isn't here tomorrow? I've made plans based on this cheese.
While Snip and Scurry had moved on, Ham and Haw continued to Ham and Haw.
One night, Haw wrote on the wall,
The more important cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it.
The next day, Ham and Haw still somehow expected to find their cheese in the same place.
Why did they do this to me?
Now, where are Snip and Scurry? Do you think they know something we don't?
No, they're just simple mice. We're little people. We're entitled to our cheese.
Yeah, but maybe we should just simply get going and find some new cheese.
Oh, no. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I want things to be the way they were.
Meanwhile, Snip and Scurry moved further into the maze. They didn't think of anything else but finding new cheese.
After much trial and error, Snip and Scurry found the biggest store of cheese they had ever seen at Cheese Station N.
Meanwhile, Hem and Haw were still hemming and hawing at empty Cheese Station C.
Then Haw began to imagine himself out in the maze, finding fresh new cheese.
Before long, he could almost taste it.
Come on, Ham. Let's go.
No, I like it here. It's comfortable. Besides, it's real dangerous out there.
Haw imagined the worst. His hope of finding new cheese faded.
So every day, Ham and Haw went from their homes to Cheeseless Station C.
And returned home again with empty bellies, full of nothing but stress.
Move my cheese. Move my cheese. Move my
Ham.
cheese.
Ham, look at us. We keep doing the same things over and over and wonder why things don't get better. It's time to move on.
You're not really going out into the maze again. Why don't we wait here until they put the cheese back?
You just don't get it. They're never going to put the old cheese back. That was yesterday's cheese. It's time to find new cheese.
Oh, but what if there's no cheese out there? Or what if you can't find it?
Ham, life moves on, and so should we.
No. Who moved my cheese? Who moved my cheese? Who moved my
If
cheese?
we
Who moved
don't
my cheese?
change, we could become extinct.
Like him, a part of Haw was afraid. Then Haw wrote on the wall what he had been thinking about.
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
It wasn't long before Haw knew what to do. Haw gathered all his courage and jogged into the unknown.
It's maze time.
At first, he felt lost. But it wasn't long before he began to find his way.
Being back in the maze isn't nearly as bad as I feared. How did I get into this situation? I've been watching what was happening.
Haw stopped to write on the maze wall what he was learning.
Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old.
Haw hoped that these handwritings on the wall would not only be reminders to himself, but also a marked trail for him to follow if he chose to enter the maze.
Why do I feel so good? I don't have any cheese and I don't know where it is. Aha! When you move beyond your fear, you feel free.
The more clearly Haw imagined himself finding new cheese, the more real it became.
Imagining myself enjoying new cheese even before I find it leads me to it.
Finally, Haw arrived at a large cheese station.
But it was practically empty.
I'm too late. If I'd moved on sooner, I might have found a lot of new cheese here.
Haw did find several delicious morsels of new cheese.
It wasn't much, but enough to keep him going.
I've got to get back and tell him there's some new cheese out here.
Haw raced back to Cheese Station C, following the route he had marked.
He found his friend still hemming and hawing. Hem had not even put on his running shoes.
Oh, Ham, you look hungry. Here, have a few bits of new cheese.
I don't think I would like new cheese. I want my own cheese back. I'm sure if I wait here long enough, things will be the way they were.
Will Hem ever change?
Hem was left behind, hemmed in by fear, comfort, and denial.
I guess Hem believes he can't or won't enjoy new cheese. He seems to believe that if he ventures into the maze, things will get worse. I see now that if I do things differently, things will get better. When you change what you believe, you change what you do.
Haw found bits of cheese here and there and began to regain his strength. He had hoped that Hem might find his way by reading the handwriting on the wall.
Paul had let go of the past and was adapting to the present. He was pursuing new cheese.
And then it happened.
Piled high everywhere was the greatest supply of cheese he had ever seen.
Wow! New cheese! Is it real or just my imagination? It is real!
Paul realized that Snip and Scurry had been enjoying new cheese for quite a while. He vowed that next time he would change faster.
Haw knew it would be easy for him to slip back to his old ways if he got too comfortable.
So each day he inspected Cheese Station N to check the condition of his cheese.
He went out into the maze and explored new areas.
He knew it was safer to be aware of his real choices than to isolate himself in his comfort zone. Then one day, Haw heard what he thought was the sound of movement out in the maze.
Could it be Hem? Was Hem about to turn the corner?
Haw hoped that maybe at last his friend was finally able to
Move to the new cheese and enjoy it.
And
So kind of fun, kind of exciting, right? Love the fact that that has some pretty cool application for us, and how we can like use that in determining kind of our decisions moving forward. I think it's super, super important. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think when you do the same thing over and over, you have the same outcomes. And I think before COVID, everybody knew kind of what the process was and what everybody did. And now this wrench has been thrown into everything. And so we're going to have to adapt and we're going to have to figure things out. And, every day we have a choice to say, okay, are we going to be positive and figure this thing out? Or are we just going to be frustrated and stay where we are because things were supposed to be like this? So I would definitely encourage people to start thinking outside the box and finding new ways to do things. And, it's very sad that things aren't the way they always have been, but it can be a huge blessing to maybe experience something that you never would have walked away and tried. And, your whole summer was set, I'm sure, because you start setting things up in January. So I understand that, but just be willing to kind of soar a little bit. And you may be soaring a little early and doing something that you didn't think you would do, but I know they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we have, Hem and Haw, who are going through a very serious change in their life as it relates, in a very silly way, as it relates to cheese, right? But here we are all in the same boat, experiencing a change across the country in higher education, and more importantly, the changes that may or may not occur with admissions and how we go about doing the application process. And some of the comments that Ha said, I found to be very encouraging, actually. One of the things, and I think that we could all take this home with us, is, Ha referenced the fact that he was afraid in the process. He was super afraid of change, but he didn't sit back like him and just let it consume him. Instead, Ha started writing things on the wall, of course, right? But he noted and stated that he took courage, like he stood courage and began to jog into the unknown, as he put it. And here we are, we're faced with a lot of unknown here in the future. How are we choosing to take care of that? How are we going to face the unknown? Are we going to face it like Hem did, or are we going to face it like Ha did? And I think I was just humored by, of course, if you know anything about me, you know that I have just a little bit of humor in me. And so a little cartoon video is always a good rest for some humor. Well, we certainly love being here tonight. We do have a couple questions that I want to kind of entertain here in our last 15 minutes. If you have any other questions or any other comments you'd like to put them in the comment section for us, we'd love to entertain them and chat about them. Jeffrey, we definitely love the fact that you've joined us tonight and watching us. Super glad that you're here with us. And he's asking the question, I wonder if colleges will adjust requirements for everything going on for this year and maybe next year. Standardized assessment is honestly not at the forefront. Plus, most counties in Georgia did not input grades that would lower their performance for the quarter after March 13th. And he's saying, right? Is that right? Will they adjust the requirements for admission? What we are hearing on our end from college admissions personnel, I've had the privilege and honor to sit in on meetings with the admissions office from Georgia Tech, the admissions office from Georgia State University. Soon we'll be in sessions with the University of Georgia. So we're starting to hear a lot of those similar questions, Jeffrey, as you're asking. And what we're hearing back is many of those standards that they've had for admissions, they aren't changing. They're not lowering the standards for admissions. The difference might be in moving forward is that colleges and universities, and what we're hearing is that they're going to, as I've referenced earlier in the evening, they're going to reference that asterisk for 2020, for the spring of 2020. They're going to recognize this fact. Georgia Tech and UGA and University of, Georgia State University have all mentioned the fact that they're not lowering or changing their standards in accepting AP credits or AP courses. So those have not changed. They're not planning to change any of their admissions requirements at this point either. However, they are taking into consideration some of those issues that may have occurred in the process, especially with grades as it relates to the COVID experience. One thing we didn't mention across the country too is the change of going test optional. There are thousands of schools that are currently test optional, and many of them have made those changes just this year. And some of them are doing it just for a year. Others are going to do it for a period of 2, maybe 3 years and kind of see how it impacts admissions. But that's not something that should deter whether or not you take the ACT or the SAT for the future. It just means that they're not going to be looking at that test grade or that test score primarily for the admissions decisions. So when it's optional, it means you can hand it in if you've got it, but if you don't have it, you don't have to sweat it, and it won't be used in consideration primarily for admissions. But as you mentioned, Stephanie, earlier in the evening, they will be using those test scores to consider merit aid, and so that's something that's very, very important to keep in mind. Stephanie, you have another question here from our viewers, which is kind of exciting, right? So how please can we help our students, Stephanie, play students play offers from multiple colleges so that the schools bid for our students' enrollment and are motivated to make better offers? That's a tricky question. Most definitely. Did you understand or hear what the question was?
I didn't quite understand what they're asking.
Okay, so how can our students play offers from multiple colleges? So for instance, if you have a particular admissions decision that's come from multiple schools, and this is my interpretation, of course, from your question. So if I get it wrong, Eric, let me know. But if you're getting offers from multiple schools, or you've been admitted from multiple schools, and now you're getting financial aid offers from those schools, and this is, of course, before you've deposited, because when you're depositing to a particular choice, you want to make sure that you're depositing only to one school and not to multiple schools. And that's to provide opportunity, because a deposit means a seat. And when you deposit to multiple schools, it means you're taking someone else's seat, because you can't take all three or take the multiple that you've submitted a deposit to. So deposit to one school only. But if you have not made that deposit yet, but you've received a financial aid award letter from multiple schools, how then for our students enrollment and are motivated to make better offers? So how can they bid? How can they make that decision so that the school might provide a better package, if you will? That's a heavy question, I will admit. That's a tough one.
I would say you need to drill down on the offers and really make sure that you're comparing apples to apples.
Good point.
Because sometimes you can think, oh, XYZ school is giving me more money, and they might be, but as you drill down and really look at the numbers, they may be higher.
Right.
So that's the first thing you really need to look at doing. Now, if there's a particular school, and I had a student once who wanted to go to a very expensive private school, and they were not financially able to do that. And although she had great grades and great ACT, basically they went in and talked to the admissions director. And then they went to financial aid and said, hey, we really want to come here, but this is our financial situation. Is there anything that you can do? And they actually did. They helped, because the student was an excellent student. They could see that the student could really contribute to the school. And she has since graduated, and she's going on to med school there. So it's been great. But you can call and talk to them specifically about your needs. And then it's just really up to what they want to do. I mean, I don't think that pitting one school against the other is a positive way to do that. If you have your heart set on a school, then go to them and say, this is really where I want to be. I think I'm going to thrive here. I want to be a part of this community, and I want to contribute to make the school better. And lay your case out and see what they do. But pitting schools against each other, I wouldn't recommend that, because that they can get very frustrated, and then that doesn't necessarily look good on your student, on your child. So
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. You definitely want to be careful with how you're handling those award letters. One thing that we emphasize at Capstone, of course, and many independent consultants across the country emphasize, is good fit, right? So if you have multiple offers, it's a little different than buying a car per se, wheeling and dealing, so to speak, as my dad used to say. But we're talking about good fit. And so to have the fact that you may have several colleges that you're considering the offers from, that's a great thing, and you should feel very proud of that, because the fact that you have multiple schools wanting you to be a part of their alumni association, right, is very, very, very commendable. However, it's super important to come to realization that one of them likely fits you better than the others. And so to what value is that financial aid award letter as it relates to how well it fits? Now, one thing also to consider is the fact that, here we are, we've got the class of 2020 getting ready to go into to college this fall, hopefully in one form or fashion. They're starting their coursework this fall. And so many of them are actually receiving their financial aid award letters as we speak. They're getting them in the mail, or they're getting them by email, and they're starting to see them. And so how do we make those decisions based on that? And one might say, given the fact that businesses have been shut down for quite some time, there's probably plenty of entrepreneurs out there, and maybe self-employed families whose income has been drastically reduced or impacted, and does not reflect what was indicated on their FAFSA form when they submitted it. Remember, our FAFSA form, when it's filled out, is now filled out based on a prior year. So we're not talking about last year, we're talking about a year before that. And so things looked a lot different prior year financially for many people, as it does today. Guess what? This is the good news here. So guess what is the word, and that is that financial aid offices are in the same boat we are. And that's the good news with this, right? Because we have experienced tragedy as well as them. They're having to put on masks to go get their groceries just like we are. And their financial situations have changed at their home just like ours has. And so, I would definitely encourage families, if there's been a significant and tangible transition in their financial income, to make that known in a very reasonable way with financial aid offices, as you communicate and build that relationship with the institution that you're working with. That's our recommendation to families, and hope that served the question well. Wow, Stefanie, it's been awesome having you on board today, and really exciting. I'm really jealous because the weather looks really great in Huntsville today, and it actually is pretty good here in Peachtree City too. So we're pretty blessed to have some good weather. We love the South, and I know you absolutely love the South as well, and love working with students in our neighborhoods, in our areas, regions, and neighboring states. And if you would like to get in touch with myself or Stefanie, you can always go to our website at www.capstoneed.com, and you can learn all about either of us and the whole gamut of what we do. So we're pretty excited to provide those services to our community. Stefanie, I'll give you the final word. How's that?
I would just encourage y'all to try to look at the positive. Thankfully, at least in the Southeast, we're starting to kind of dig out of this, and our states are starting to move. And I know my daughter actually went to a friend's house tonight, so things are better. But just continue to try to look at the positive and try to make sure that the information you're getting is factual. And I know it changes on a daily basis, and some of these colleges are really changing. I just encourage you to look at this as a positive and to enjoy this summer. And thanks for having me. I've loved it, and I'd love to do it again. So I wish y'all well, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, Stefanie. And thank you everyone who's been watching and listening to us tonight and sharing in the experience. And we invite you to come back next week, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern and 6 o'clock Central. And we've got an incredible lineup that goes all the way through June. We're adding each week now as well, new topics, and we're pretty excited. We've got some pretty amazing topics coming up, and you definitely don't want to miss. Thank you again, Stefanie. Thank you, viewers, for being with us. And you all have a great evening, and you all stay safe. Bye now.
Bye.